Hey everyone, welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. I have been sitting with this story for a while now, turning it over in my mind like a puzzle that refuses to stay solved, and I keep coming back to the same raw truth about family. Sometimes the people who are supposed to lift you up are the ones who hand you the knife and smile while they ask you to cut your own heart out. My name is Emily Grace Richardson. I am 33 years old. And the day my mother in law looked me dead in the eye across a polished conference table in the community management office of our private lakeside development near Lake Norman, North Carolina, and delivered the most painful ultimatum of my life. Everything I thought I understood about loyalty and blood just fractured. I still remember the way the late afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, catching on the fake crystal chandelier and making everything feel too bright, too sharp for the words she was saying. My hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white, but I kept my face steady because that is what I do. I am the patient one, the unyielding one, the forensic accountant who spends her days untangling other people's lies for a living. Yet here I was, in the middle of what should have been a simple meeting about updating some community records, watching my entire world tilt sideways. Barbara Jean Hargrove. My mother-in-law had called this meeting herself. She said it was just paperwork, something minor about the family trust we had all agreed to years ago when Matthew and I bought our house in the gated enclave. She had even smiled that tight practice smile of hers when she suggested we bring Megan along. Megan Elizabeth Hargrove, my sister-in-law, who had moved into the development 2 streets over last spring with her husband. I thought it was odd, but I showed up anyway because I've always tried to keep the peace. That is the thing about me, I guess. I keep showing up even when every instinct screams to run. The ultimatum came without warning, delivered in that calm, measured voice she uses when she knows she has the upper hand. "Emily, dear," she said, sliding a thick manila folder across the glossy wood toward me, "it is time we stopped pretending. Sign this notarized family agreement today, right now, or we will have no choice but to take the necessary steps to protect Isabella from your instability." The words landed like a slap. I stared at the folder. The cover page already had her signature and Megan's dated from last week. A notarized agreement that on the surface looked like it was about streamlining family decisions for the children's benefit. But I caught the fine print even before I opened it fully. It would quietly transfer day-to-day legal decision-making authority over Isabella's education medical choices and the modest college fund we had started for her straight into Barbara's and Megan's hands, all under the guise of stability, because according to them, my long hours at work and my chaotic energy were putting our daughter at risk. Megan leaned forward, her voice soft, but edged with that fake concern she does so well. "We are only thinking of Isabella. You know how stressed you have been lately, Emily. This is not about taking her away. It is about making sure she has 2 stable women in her life who can step in when you cannot." My husband, Matthew David Richardson, sat beside me, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. He had come straight from his job at the regional bank and still had his tie loosened. He did not say anything at first. He just looked between us like he was hoping the floor would open up and swallow the whole conversation. I felt the chaos rising in my chest, that unstable swirl of rage and disbelief, and something sharper, something that tasted like betrayal I had been swallowing for years. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed a short, jagged sound that did not sound like me at all. "You want me to sign over control of my own daughter's future because I work too much. After everything we have built here together," Barbara's eyes never wavered. "It is not a request, Emily. It is the only way we avoid involving the community board or worse. You know how quickly gossip travels in a place like this. One word from us about your emotional volatility, and suddenly everyone at the lake club, the school pickup line, the neighborhood events will be looking at you differently. Do the right thing for once." The room felt too small, the air too thick. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I flipped through the pages. Every clause was worded so carefully, so deceptively, that it looked generous on paper. but I saw the trap. This was not about stability. This was about control. Deceptive trust manipulation wrapped in pretty legal language and family concern. I pushed the folder back toward her, my voice low and unsteady, even though I was trying to hold it together. I'm not signing anything. Not today. Not ever. Megan's face hardened. You always make everything so difficult. Mom is only trying to help. Barbara stood up slowly, smoothing her linen blazer. Think about it, Emily. You have 24 hours. After that, we start the paperwork on our end. And trust me, darling, we have the connections here. The board listens to us. They left me sitting there with Matthew, the folder still open like a wound on the table. My husband reached for my hand, but I pulled away the chaotic swirl in my head, making it impossible to sit still. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the tile. Did you know about this? I asked him, my voice cracking despite myself. Did you know they were planning this? He looked exhausted. I knew they were worried about Isabella's schedule with your work trips, but I did not think it would go this far. Emily, maybe we can talk to them, find a middle ground. There is no middle ground when someone hands you an ultimatum like that, not when it is dressed up as love. I drove home along the winding roads that circle Lake Norman, the water glittering under the late sun like nothing was wrong. Isabella was at after-school activities, thank goodness. I needed time to breathe, to think. But the thoughts would not settle. They kept spinning, chaotic and unstable, flashing back to all the little moments over the years that I had brushed off. The way Barbara would casually comment on my parenting in front of neighbors. The way Megan would helpfully offer to watch Isabella during my deadlines, then text Matthew later about how overwhelmed I seemed. The way they both smiled sweetly while slowly tightening the net. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was dipping behind the trees, and my phone was already buzzing with a message from Megan. We love you, Emily. Please do not make this harder than it has to be. I wanted to throw the phone into the lake. That night, I barely slept. Matthew tried to talk me down, but every reassurance he offered felt hollow. The next morning, I did what I always do when the ground shifts under me. I went to work. I walked into the mid-sized financial consulting firm where I have spent the last 8 years untangling corporate messes, and I sat down at my desk like the world had not just tried to rewrite my rights as a mother. That is when Ryan Patrick Donovan, my colleague from the compliance team, knocked on my office door. Ryan is the kind of guy who notices everything, the quiet numbers guy who has saved more than one client from disaster with his meticulous eye. He took one look at my face and closed the door behind him. You look like you have not slept in a week, he said, dropping into the chair across from me. Everything okay at home? I almost lied. Almost told him it was nothing. But the words spilled out instead, the whole ugly ultimatum, the notarized agreement, the threat of community gossip and custody pressure. I watched his expression change from concern to something sharper. Emily, that sounds like classic trust manipulation. Let me see the scan if you have it. I have seen similar language in some estate cases that went sideways. I pulled up the digital copy on my screen. Ryan leaned in, scrolling slowly, his brow furrowing deeper with every paragraph. This is not standard. The way they buried the decision transfer clauses, it is deliberate. Give me 24 hours. I will run it through our internal review tools. Off the record. I nodded gratitude, mixing with the unstable storm still raging inside me. For the first time since the meeting, I felt a flicker of something like determination cutting through the chaos. I was not going to let them rewrite my life on paper. Not without a fight. But as Ryan left my office, my phone lit up again. This time it was a group text from Barbara, copied to Megan, and even a couple of our closer neighbors in the development. The message was short, sweet, and devastating in its politeness. Just a reminder that we are all here to support the Richardson family during this difficult time. Emily has been under a lot of pressure lately. Please keep her and little Isabella in your thoughts. The chaos surged again. They were already starting the isolation campaign, turning the tight-knit lakeside community against me before I could even respond. I stared at the screen, heart hammering, and wondered how deep this deception really went. The group text from my mother-in-law sat there on my screen like a live wire, the polite little words burning holes straight through the fragile calm I was trying to hold on to. My mind spiraled in that chaotic, unstable way it does when everything feels like it is slipping out from under me, one polite jab at a time. I wanted to scream into the empty kitchen, to throw the phone across the room and watch it shatter. But instead, I just stood there, gripping the counter until my knuckles ached, the chaos churning faster with every reread. My husband walked in a few minutes later, still in his work shirt, and the look on his face told me he had already seen the message too. He set his keys down slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal, and I could feel the unstable storm inside me whipping harder. "Emily, they are not wrong about how stressed you have been," he said quietly, his voice careful in that way that always made the chaos feel even louder in my head. Maybe signing something temporary would buy us some breathing room. You know how my mother-in-law gets when she thinks she's protecting the family. I laughed again, that same jagged sound from the meeting, and it scared me how quickly it turned bitter. Breathing room. She just threatened to turn the entire lakeside compound against me in one text. "Matthew, this is not about our daughter. This is about control, and you are standing there acting like it is reasonable." The argument spiraled from there, words flying in unstable bursts, while the sun dipped lower over Lake Norman outside our windows. My husband kept trying to play peacemaker, reminding me how my mother-in-law had always been the one to step in during tough times, how my sister-in-law had offered to help with school pickups when my work trips piled up. But every defense he offered only made the chaos swirl hotter because I could see the pattern now clear and suffocating. They had been chipping away for years, small comments here, helpful suggestions. They're all wrapped in that deceptive trust manipulation that looked like love until you looked closer. I finally told him I needed air and walked out onto the back deck overlooking the water, my thoughts racing in loops that refused to settle. The next morning, the isolation hit harder than I expected. At the community coffee kiosk near the marina, two neighbors I had chatted with for years suddenly found reasons to turn away when I approached. One even pulled her child closer with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. By the time I dropped my daughter off at school, the whispers felt real, like the whole gated enclave was already picking sides without knowing the full story. My sister-in-law's car was parked 2 spots over in the pickup lane, and she gave me that soft, concerned wave that always masked something sharper. The chaos in my chest made it hard to breathe evenly as I drove straight to the office, hands shaking on the wheel. Ryan Patrick Donovan was waiting for me when I got there, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a focused intensity that cut through my swirling thoughts. He closed the door to my office again and slid into the chair like he had not slept either. I stayed late running the scan of that notarized agreement through our compliance tools. He said, voice low. "Emily, this is not just about custody language. There's a financial trail buried in the fine print and the supporting schedules they attached. Your mother-in-law and your sister-in-law have been routing small but consistent transfers out of the family trust account we set up for your daughter. Nothing huge at first glance, but the pattern is deliberate. They are covering some personal debts tied to the compound's homeowners association fees and a couple of property liens they never disclosed." My stomach dropped, the unstable chaos inside me shifting into something sharper, fiercer. I leaned forward, heart hammering. "Show me." Ryan pulled up the documents on his laptop, highlighting lines of code and ledger entries that made my forensic accountant brain click into overdrive, even through the emotional storm. The transfers were masked as administrative adjustments and family support allocations, but the routing led straight back to accounts my mother-in-law controlled. My sister-in-law had co-signed several of them. It was classic deceptive trust manipulation, hidden in paperwork that looked legitimate until someone like Ryan or me knew exactly where to look. The colleague twist landed like a lifeline in the middle of the madness. For the first time since the ultimatum, I felt a fierce determination cutting through the chaos, telling me I was not crazy, that this went deeper than just controlling my daughter. But Ryan was not finished. I looped in Natalie Brooke Lawson from our legal side. She specializes in family trusts and estate disputes. She took one look and said the agreement is designed to quietly shift more authority if you do not sign. Natalie wants to meet with you this afternoon off the books. She thinks we can trace this further before your mother-in-law makes her next move. Natalie Brooke Lawson arrived at the small conference room down the hall, an hour later, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense in a tailored blazer, carrying a tablet already loaded with notes. She shook my hand firmly and got straight to it. Emily, this financial trail Ryan uncovered changes everything. The notarized agreement is not just a power grab. It is a cover for them to access and redirect funds without your oversight. But there is more. While digging into the public records on the compound properties, something from your husband's family history popped up. Old court filings from about 15 years ago mention a quiet settlement involving your father-in-law's estate. It looks like there were some unresolved issues around hidden assets and control clauses that were never fully disclosed to the rest of the family. Childhood secrets, or at least family secrets from back then, resurfacing in the paperwork now. The words hit like another wave in the unstable storm raging inside me. I had heard vague stories about my father-in-law's passing years ago, something about financial strain and family arguments, but my husband had always brushed it off as old drama. Now it felt like the past was clawing its way into the present, twisting the knife deeper. Natalie kept talking, her voice steady, while my thoughts spun wildly. She outlined next steps, ways to freeze any further transfers, and challenged the agreement on grounds of undue influence and financial non-disclosure. For a moment, the fierce, determined part of me latched onto her words like a rope in rough water, but the chaos would not let me rest. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with another message, this one from my mother-in-law directly. The community board is reviewing some concerns about stability in the Richardson household. We are all praying for the best outcome for little one. 24 hours is almost up, dear. Attached was a screenshot of what looked like an email thread already circulating among a few key neighbors. My sister-in-law had forwarded it with her own note about supporting the family through this difficult transition. I felt the unstable swirl cresting again as I showed the message to Ryan and Natalie. They exchanged a quick look, and Natalie started typing notes furiously. This is escalating faster than I expected. We need to get ahead of the social isolation before it affects your work reputation too. The financial trail gives us leverage, but we have to be careful. There might be a silent partner involved in these transfers, someone who has not surfaced yet. The words hung in the air, adding another layer of suspense to the already chaotic mess in my head. I left the office that evening with a thick folder of printed evidence under my arm, the lakeside roads blurring past my windows as I drove home. My husband was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in, his face drawn. He had seen the latest texts, too. The conversation that followed was another unstable storm of half-explanations and defensive silences, him caught between me and the pressure from his mother and sister. I could feel the patient, unyielding part of me holding the line, but the chaos made it hard to see clearly anymore. Later that night, after my daughter was asleep, I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the notarized agreement scan again. The financial trail Ryan had uncovered kept replaying in my mind, mixing with the resurfacing hints about old family secrets. Something was still missing, some deeper layer that explained why my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law were pushing this hard right now. The unstable thoughts would not quiet. I needed answers, and I needed them before the 24 hours ran out completely. Then my phone lit up one more time. A new message from an unknown number, but the wording was unmistakable. It was my father-in-law's old business partner, someone I had not heard from in years. Emily, we need to talk privately. There are things about the old trust agreements your mother-in-law never told the family. Call me tomorrow. This goes back further than you think. My heart slammed against my ribs as the chaos inside me hit a new peak. The silent partner was finally stirring, and whatever he had to say was about to change everything. I stared at the message, fierce determination battling the unstable swirl of fear and resolve, wondering if I was ready for the truth that was about to surface. I stared at the unfamiliar number glowing on my screen, the chaotic swirl inside my chest kicking into overdrive like a storm that refused to break. The message from my father-in-law's old business partner had arrived at the worst possible moment, promising truths I had not asked for, but now desperately needed. Sleep had been impossible after that, my thoughts spinning in unstable loops of fear and fierce determination as I paced the quiet house, the lake outside my windows, reflecting moonlight that felt too calm for the madness brewing in me. The next morning, I dialed the number before the sun was fully up, my voice, steady, even as the chaos made my pulse race. The man on the other end introduced himself as Victor Ellis, someone I had only met in passing at a few family events years ago. His voice carried the weight of someone who had held onto a secret far too long. Emily, I've been watching from the sidelines, but I cannot stay silent anymore. Your father-in-law made a dying admission to me in the hospital the week before he passed. He confessed that he had let your mother-in-law control the family trust paperwork for years, creating clauses and rerouting funds in ways that favored your sister-in-law and kept the rest of us in the dark. He called it his biggest regret, saying the deceptive trust manipulation started as protection, but turned into something darker. There are old notarized documents from back then that match the pattern in the new agreement she is pushing on you now. Childhood secrets from the estate settlement are resurfacing because she is repeating the same playbook. The words hit like a fresh wave in the unstable storm raging through me, but I gripped the phone tighter, the patient, unyielding part of me locking every detail into place. Victor offered to provide a sworn affidavit and copies of the old records he had kept as the silent partner in my father-in-law's business dealings. He had never been named publicly, but his signature was on several foundational trust documents that my mother-in-law had quietly altered over time. The financial trail Ryan had uncovered suddenly connected to something much older, a hidden web of paperwork that proved this was not a new power grab. It was a continuation of years of control disguised as family duty. I thanked him, my voice fierce, even as the chaos made my hands shake, and ended the call, knowing I finally had the missing piece. That afternoon, Natalie Brooke Lawson and Ryan Patrick Donovan met me at the office again, their faces sharpening when I shared the call recording I had made. Natalie's eyes lit up with that legal fire I was starting to rely on. This changes the entire game, Emily. Combined with the financial trail we traced and the scan of the new notarized agreement, we have grounds to file a counter motion immediately. Your mother-in-law's karma is coming through paperwork she cannot outrun. Ryan nodded, printing fresh ledgers that showed the pattern of transfers stretching back more than a decade. The evidence felt solid, a quiet weapon built from numbers and old admissions rather than shouting matches. But the real confrontation came the following evening when my mother-in-law summoned another family discussion at the community management office, this time insisting the whole household attend. My husband drove us there in heavy silence, the lakeside roads feeling narrower than usual under the weight of everything unsaid. When we walked in, my mother-in-law was already seated at the head of the table, my sister-in-law beside her like a perfectly coordinated pair, both of them wearing that calm, concerned mask they did so well. The air thickened the moment I sat down, the chaotic, unstable energy in me cresting as I laid the thick folder of evidence on the table between us. My mother-in-law started with her usual measured tone, sliding another copy of the notarized agreement toward me. Emily, the 24 hours are long past. Sign this so we can move forward as a family and protect Isabella from any further instability. The community board is already asking questions. I let the chaos show just enough in my voice, but the fierce determination held the line. No, I am not signing. And you are not going to rewrite my rights as a mother with pretty legal language and neighborhood gossip. I know about the financial trail. I know about the old trust manipulations. And I know what your husband admitted on his deathbed about how you ran everything behind the scenes. My sister-in-law's face flickered for the first time, that soft concern cracking. My mother-in-law's eyes narrowed, but she recovered quickly, her voice still smooth. Those are old family matters that have nothing to do with now. You are overreacting as usual. The conversation spiraled from there in unstable bursts of half denials and sharp accusations, my mother in law driving every twist with that deceptive trust manipulation she had perfected. My husband tried to mediate caught between us, but the evidence spoke louder than any of us. Natalie had prepared a summary packet that Ryan slid across the table, highlighting the transfers, the old documents Victor had provided, and the sworn statement tying it all together. The room grew quiet as my mother-in-law read her composure, slipping into something colder, more frantic beneath the surface. You think paperwork from years ago means anything? She finally snapped the mask, dropping just enough for the real pressure to show. The community here knows us. They trust us. One word from me, and your reputation in this compound will be finished. That was the moment the ironic twist landed sharp and unexpected, even in the chaos. My husband, who had been silent through most of the meeting, finally spoke, his voice low but clear. Mom, I saw the old files too. Dad told me pieces of it before he passed, but I never wanted to believe it went this far. I cannot keep pretending this is just about helping Isabella. This has to stop. The silence that followed felt heavier than any ultimatum. My mother-in-law's face tightened, but she said nothing more about signing. Natalie stepped in calmly, outlining the next steps, a formal challenge to the agreement on grounds of undue influence and financial non-disclosure, backed by the old notarized records and Victor's statement. Karma through paperwork was already unfolding. The community board would receive copies of the evidence as part of the formal complaint my team prepared, not as gossip, but as documented fact. In the weeks that followed, the partial victory settled in with a bittersweet weight I had not expected. The notarized agreement was blocked in family court. The financial trail exposed enough irregularities that my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law had to answer questions from the homeowners association about the compound's trust accounts. They retained some standing, but the whispers turned in a new direction, and slowly the close friendships I had built in the lakeside enclave began to erode. Neighbors who had pulled away during the initial campaign never fully came back, even after the truth surfaced. The isolation I had feared became the irreversible loss I carried forward, a quiet reminder of how thoroughly the deception had spread. My husband and I worked through our own fractures in counseling, but the damage to the larger family ties remained. My mother-in-law kept her distance after that. Her influence in the compound dimmed but not gone. My sister-in-law sent one last message full of familiar concern that rang hollow now. I did not reply. The chaotic, unstable storm inside me finally began to quiet into something steadier, though never completely still. I had protected my daughter and my own autonomy, but the cost was the peaceful illusions I once held about family in this place. The friendships erased left an unsettled ache, yet beneath it I felt empowered in a raw, defiant way, no longer carrying the guilt of trying to make toxic patterns work. I chose peace over pretense, releasing the toxic family guilt that had kept me showing up for years, even when every instinct screamed otherwise. It was not a clean victory, but it was mine. The lakeside compound still sparkled under the North Carolina sun, but I walked its paths now with clearer eyes, boundaries firmly in place, and a quiet strength that no notarized agreement could touch. Thank you for listening to my story. What's your breaking point?